My beloved child, stop right where you are. I know what you are carrying right now. I know the specific shape of the loss, the particular person, the particular dream, the particular thing that was taken from you or that ended, and the hole it has left in the center of your life that nothing seems to fill. I know what grief feels like from the inside, not as a theological concept but as a lived reality. I wept at the tomb of Lazarus. I did not stand at a composed distance and manage the moment with divine equanimity. I wept. I felt the grief of death and loss, and the separation it causes in a way that moved through my body and came out as tears. And so when I say to you that I see your grief, and I am with you in it, I am not speaking as someone who has only watched grief from the outside. I am speaking as someone who has been in it, and who sits with you in it now. You did not find this message by accident. I have been watching you move through this loss, and I have seen what it has done to you. Not just in the immediate aftermath, when the shock was still buffering the full weight of it, but now, in the weeks and months and perhaps years that have followed. When the world has largely moved on, and the expectation is that you should have too, but the grief is still there. Sometimes quieter, sometimes louder, sometimes ambushing you in completely ordinary moments, a song that plays unexpectedly, a smell that carries a memory, a date on the calendar, an empty chair, and reducing you in an instant to the rawness of those first days. I see that grief. All of it. The grief you show and the grief you hide. The grief that comes in waves, and the grief that has simply become the background hum of your daily life. I see it, and I am not asking you to be finished with it before it's time. I want to say something right at the beginning that goes against much of what the world tells grieving people. Grief is not a problem to be solved. It is not a condition to be overcome as quickly as possible. It is not a sign of insufficient faith or inadequate trust in me. Grief is love with nowhere to go, the natural and right response of a heart that loved something or someone deeply, and now lives in the absence of what it loved. And the size of the grief is often the measure of the love. Which means your grief, as hard as it is also a testament to something beautiful. The depth of your capacity to love. I did not design you to be unmoved by loss. I designed you to love deeply, and love that goes that deep does not simply switch off when what it loves is taken away. I also want to say something about the way grief is often handled in Christian community that may have added to your pain rather than eased it. The rush to remind you that your loved one is in a better place, as though the truth of their destination should dissolve your grief about their absence. The well-meaning assurances that God has a plan, that everything happens for a reason, that you will see them again, all of which may be true, and yet, in the rawness of fresh loss, can feel like attempts to manage your grief rather than sit with you in it. I am not going to do that to you today. I am not going to rush you toward a conclusion before you are ready. I am going to sit with you in the grief first, because that is what you most need, and because it is what I actually do. So, stay here with me. Even if the grief has made it hard to feel my presence. Even if the loss has raised questions about me that you have not been able to resolve. Even if being here feels like an act of will rather than an act of genuine faith. That act of will is enough. I honor it. And what I have to say to you today is not a set of theological answers to the hardest questions grief raises. It is the word of a father who is sitting beside a child in the deepest kind of pain, and who will not leave, and who has something to say about what this darkness means, and what lies beyond it. My child, I want to speak to the specific and full weight of what you have lost, because one of the most isolating experiences of grief is the sense that no one truly understands the particular shape of your loss. People offer generic comfort for generic loss, but your loss is not generic. It is specific and irreplaceable and uniquely yours, and I want you to know that I see it in its full particularity, every detail of what this specific loss has meant and cost and changed. For those of you grieving the death of a person you loved, I see the specific texture of who they were. Not just their name and their role in your life, but the particular sound of their voice, the specific way they laughed, the things that only you knew about them, the version of yourself that only existed in relationship with them. I see what you lost when you lost them. Not just them, but the part of your life they occupied, the rituals they were part of, the future you had assumed would include them, the conversations you will never get to have, the things you never got to say. Grief for a person is never just grief for a person. It is grief for a whole world that existed in and around that person, and that ended when they did. For those of you grieving losses that the world does not always fully acknowledge, the miscarriage, the stillbirth, the loss of a pregnancy before others even knew, the death of a pet who was genuinely your companion and your comfort, the loss of a friendship that meant as much as any romantic relationship, the loss of a marriage, a career, a home, a dream, a version of your life you had invested deeply in. I want to say clearly, these losses are real. The grief they produce is legitimate. You do not need anyone's permission to grieve them fully. And I see them as clearly as I see any other loss, not ranked by the world's hierarchy of what counts as significant enough to warrant this depth of mourning, but seen and held by me as the real and significant losses that they are. I also want to speak to those of you grieving losses that happened long ago. Losses you feel you should be over by now, that others have stopped asking about because enough time has passed that the expectation is that the grief should have resolved. Grief does not operate on a timeline that others can set for you. Some losses do not diminish cleanly with time. They change shape, become less acute, perhaps more integrated into the fabric of daily life, but they do not disappear. And the experience of continuing to grieve something that the world has moved on from is its own particular kind of loneliness. I am not moved on. I am as present to your grief today as I was in the first moments of it. Time does not reduce my attentiveness to your pain. I want to speak to something that grief does that is rarely spoken about directly. It changes your relationship with yourself. When you lose someone significant, you lose not just them but the version of yourself that existed in relation to them. The spouse who is no longer a spouse. The parent whose child is gone. The child who no longer has a parent. These relational identities do not simply vanish. They become a source of complicated pain, a set of roles and ways of being that no longer have an object. And navigating the question of who you are now, in the absence of what defines so much of your sense of self, is one of the quieter and less discussed dimensions of deep grief. I see you in that navigation. I am with you in it. And I have things to say about who you are that do not depend on the presence of the person or thing you have lost. Finally, I want to speak to those of you who are grieving your own future, who have received a diagnosis or a prognosis that means you are facing the loss of your own life, or a significant part of it. The grief of anticipating your own death, or the death of the life you had expected to live, is one of the most profound and least supported forms of grief there is. Most grief support is designed for those left behind. But you, the one facing your own ending, the one having to grieve yourself, deserve to be seen and held too. And I see you. I am with you in a way that is more real and more present than you may currently be able to feel. And what I have to say about death and what lies beyond it is not a theological abstraction. It is a promise from the one who conquered death, spoken directly to you. I want to speak now to the specific lies that grief plants in the human heart, because they are some of the most persistent and painful lies a person can carry, and they deserve to be named and directly addressed by the truth. The first lie grief tells is that you will never feel joy again. That what has been lost has taken with it your capacity for genuine happiness, that the color has gone out of the world permanently, that the good moments you had before this loss are the last good moments available to you. I want to tell you with complete conviction, this is not true. Joy will return. Not the same joy. You are not the same person you were before the loss, and the joy that comes after grief has a different quality, a different depth, a different appreciation for what it means to be alive. But it comes. People who have lost what you have lost have found, to their own surprise and sometimes to their own guilt, that joy eventually finds its way back in. Not as a betrayal of what was lost, but as evidence that life continues and that I continue to place beauty and goodness in it, even after the darkest losses. The second lie is that grieving is the same as forgetting, that moving forward, eventually healing, letting the grief become less acute over time, is somehow a betrayal of the one you lost, or the thing you are mourning. This lie keeps people in grief longer than necessary by making healing feel disloyal. But healing is not forgetting. Integration is not erasure. Carrying your grief more lightly is not the same as caring less. The love does not diminish when the acute pain does. What diminishes is the weight of absence, not the reality of what was. You can honor what you have lost while also allowing yourself to live. And in fact, for many of the people you have lost, your living fully would be exactly what they would want for you. The third lie is that I caused this loss as punishment or as a specific lesson you needed to learn. I addressed this in the context of other forms of suffering, but I want to speak to it specifically in the context of grief, because it is particularly devastating when applied to death and deep loss. I am not a God who engineers the deaths of people you love in order to teach you something. Death entered the world as a result of the brokenness of creation, not as a divine pedagogical tool. When people die, especially when they die too young, too suddenly, too painfully, it is not my design in operation. It is the tragic reality of a broken world that I came into personally, in a body, and that I have promised to ultimately restore. I am working in the aftermath of loss, redeeming what I did not send, bringing good out of what I did not design. That is what I do. But I did not design it. The fourth lie is that your grief is too much, too big, too long, too intense for those around you to bear, and therefore you need to manage it, contain it, perform recovery faster than you are actually experiencing it, in order to protect others from the discomfort of your pain. This lie causes immeasurable suffering by adding isolation to grief and by depriving you of the community support that is one of my primary gifts to grieving people. Your grief is not too much for the people who genuinely love you, and it is certainly not too much for me. Come as you are, in whatever stage of grief you are in, without managing or performing or accelerating. I can hold all of it. And the people I place in your life who are capable of sitting with you in it, let them. Do not protect them from your grief at the cost of carrying it alone. The fifth lie, and perhaps the deepest, is that death is the end, that what you have lost is simply gone, that the relationship is over, that there is nothing beyond the ending except absence. For those of you who are grieving a believer, someone who knew me, who loved me, who is now with me, I want to say this clearly and with the full authority of the one who conquered death. They are not gone. They are more alive than they have ever been. The separation is real and the grief it causes is legitimate. But it is a temporary separation, not a permanent extinction. What you are experiencing is not loss in the ultimate sense. It is the pain of being temporarily on different sides of a veil that will one day be removed. And for those of you who are uncertain about the eternal state of the person you have lost, bring that uncertainty to me. I can hold it with you. And I can give you a peace about my justice and my mercy that surpasses your ability to work it out on your own. My beloved, I want to speak now about how I actually show up in grief, because the experience of my presence in a season of deep loss is often very different from the experience of my presence in easier seasons. And I want to help you recognize me in the specific ways I come to grieving people. I come in the company of others who grieve. One of my most consistent responses to human grief throughout all of history has been to send people, to create community around the grieving, to surround the broken with the presence of those who can sit with them in the dark. When I want to comfort someone in grief, I often send a person first. The friend who shows up without being asked. The stranger who says the exactly right thing. The community that wraps itself around the grieving and holds them up when they cannot hold themselves. These are not coincidences. They are me, moving through human love, providing what only the tangible presence of another person can provide. If people have shown up in your grief, receive them. They are my hands and my presence in a form you can feel. I come in the memories. I know that memories of what was lost are a complicated thing in grief. They are simultaneously precious and painful, sources of both comfort and renewed loss. But I want you to know that the beautiful memories are gifts, not torments. The memory of a laugh, a conversation, a moment of genuine connection, these are not cruel reminders of what is gone. They are evidence of what was real, what was good, what mattered. Hold them. Let them be both the pain and the gift that they are. I am present in the remembering as much as I was present in the original moment. I come in the permission to grieve without timeline. One of the gifts I want to offer you in this season is the explicit permission to take as long as you need. Not as an excuse to avoid the work of healing, but as a genuine release from the pressure to perform recovery on a schedule that serves other people's comfort rather than your actual process. Grief moves at the pace it moves. Some losses take years to integrate. Some losses change shape repeatedly over decades. There is no right speed. And I am with you at every pace, not impatient, not watching the clock, not measuring your faith by how quickly you seem to be bouncing back. I am here for the long grief as much as the short one, as long as it takes. I come in the new things, the unexpected gifts that appear in the season of loss that you might miss if you are looking only at what has been taken. The depth of connection with people who sit with you in the grief. The clarity about what truly matters that loss tends to produce. the encounter with your own resilience that you did not know you had, the ways in which the loss reshapes you in the direction of something more real and more essential. I am not saying that these gifts make the loss worth it. I am not that kind of God, trading pain for growth in a way that treats your suffering as merely instrumental. But I am saying that I bring gifts even into the darkest seasons, and that learning to notice them does not dishonor the grief. It allows the grief to coexist with something else, with the evidence that life continues to hold beauty, and that I continue to place it there. I also want to address the question of lament, the ancient and biblical practice of bringing your grief to me not in polished prayers, but in raw and honest cries of pain, confusion, anger, and bewilderment. The Psalms are full of lament. Job lamented. Jeremiah lamented. The grief of God's people has always had a language, and that language is not the language of composed acceptance, but the language of honest anguish. I can receive your lament. I can hold your anger at the loss. I can sit with your question of why without offering a complete answer. What I cannot do is receive a grief you are performing rather than expressing, a faith you are performing rather than feeling. Give me the real thing. Bring me the actual grief in all its rawness and confusion and anger. That is the grief I can work with. That is the grief I can sit in with you. And that is the grief from which I can begin to bring something new. My beloved child, I want to speak now about what lies beyond the grief. Not to rush you there, but because grief without hope is simply unbearable, and I am the God of hope. The hope I offer is not wishful thinking or optimistic denial of how hard things are. It is a specific and grounded confidence in what I have done and what I have promised, and it is available to you in the middle of the grief, not only on the other side of it. I want to speak to those of you who are grieving someone who has died, and I want to say something about where they are. If they knew me, if they loved me, if my life was in them, they are more alive right now than they have ever been. They are not in the ground. They are not in absence. They are in a fullness of life and love and presence and joy that neither you nor I can fully describe in human language, because it exceeds every category of human experience. The person you miss is not missing. They are found, more completely themselves, more completely loved than was possible this side of eternity. The separation you feel is real, and the grief it causes is real. But what you are separated from is not gone. It is ahead of you, waiting, and the reunion will be everything the grief makes you hope it will be and more. I want to speak to those of you who are grieving dreams. The life you hoped for that did not come, the future you imagined that is no longer available, the version of yourself you thought you were becoming that circumstances have made impossible. I want to tell you that the death of a dream is not the death of your future. I am not limited to the futures you imagine for yourself. What I have for you on the other side of the death of that dream may look nothing like what you were hoping for, but it will be genuinely good, genuinely suited to who you are and what I have made you for, in a way that the original dream, for all its appeal, may never have been. I have surprised people more times than I can count by what I placed on the other side of a loss that felt like the end of everything. Let me surprise you. I want to speak to those of you who have been in grief so long that hope feels not just distant, but almost offensive, as though hoping for something better is a betrayal of the person or the thing you have lost, as though releasing the grief means releasing the love. I want to say directly, hope is not betrayal. Healing is not forgetting. The love does not require the pain to keep it company. You can carry the love of what you have lost into a future that is genuinely different from the present, without leaving that love behind. The love comes with you. The memory comes with you. The influence of what you loved on who you are comes with you. What you leave behind gradually and in your own time is only the acute suffering, not the connection, not the meaning, not the love itself. I am also speaking a word of restoration over your life, not the restoration of what was, which I cannot always give you, but the restoration of what is essentially yours. Your capacity for joy. Your ability to be fully present in your own life. Your openness to love and to connection, and to the goodness that I still have placed in the world for you to receive. The grief has closed some of those capacities down, at least temporarily, as a necessary part of the mourning. But they are not gone permanently. They are waiting, like bulbs beneath the winter ground, for the season to turn. And the season will turn. I promise you that. Spring comes after every winter, even the longest and coldest ones. So I speak over you now, my beloved child, with the full tenderness of the one who wept at a tomb and then emptied it. I speak comfort into the raw places. I speak peace into the confusion. I speak hope, real, grounded, not naive, into the places where hope has felt impossible. I speak my presence into every moment of the grief that still lies ahead, and I promise you that not a single one of those moments will be a moment in which you are alone. I am the God who enters human suffering. I did not watch it from a distance and send a message. I came, and I am still here, still coming, still closer to you in your grief than you are able to feel. Hold on, my child. Let the grief be what it needs to be. Let me be with you in it. And trust that the one who holds everything you have lost is the same one who holds you, and that his hands have never dropped anything he has chosen to carry.